Yo, what up, though? Welcome back to another episode of Let's Talk Fam with Dante and Takia.
What's up?
Hey, I think we on the road now, bro.
We are.
We are. Like, I like this. This is cool. That's what's up. This is cool. Like, what's been going on in the world this week for you? Like, what are you paying attention to? What are you reading? What are you thinking in this present moment? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but like,
it's all good.
Yeah.
Octavia Butler. Octavia Butler.
Say more.
Black futurist. Like,
the listeners may not know her. Can you say a little spill on?
Google it. I need you to know who she
y'all
is
are smart
in these
enough.
Black
True.
History moments. You can literally type in a hashtag and go crazy.
Yeah.
She is amazing. Anything that I could say that's off the top of my head will not do any of the work that she has produced, created, justice. So good.
Why Octavia right now for you?
You know, one of my professors randomly brought up last week that he was reading, and I was like, you know what? You're right, because I'm feeling a little some type of way right now. So let me pull out Parable of the Sowers. Let me get back into that for a second. Let me imagine and be creative a little bit and just think about things in another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what's up.
She had a way with words in that way.
She did.
Pulling out creativity.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about Octavia Butler that I always go back to, and I do this all the time. There's a have you ever seen the Octavia Butler affirmations?
No.
What?
No.
Oh my God.
It's on the internet?
Oh, it's on the internet.
Okay, I'm gonna find it.
Google it. For sure. I'm crying. Google it, and there's a so Octavia Butler, when she would go through like various tough times, she would have these kind of, like the old school dividers in notebooks.
Yeah.
Like, say you got pages and you got a notebook that had a ruled notebook that has like dividers in it, right?
Yeah.
So she would do her work, because during that time when she was writing, a lot of the writing was like by hand. A lot of people wrote by hand, and I started writing by hand lately too, and it's been like really cool. So in the dividers that she had in her notebooks of writing, there were affirmations like, I will be a New York Times bestselling writer. I will be this. I will be that. I will read my books. And she would like affirm constantly every day, like who she was, or whenever she needed it, she would go back to like that affirmation. Well, there was a moment when she was teaching, and here's this black woman out of California, I think Los Angeles. She actually was
Pasadena.
She's from Pasadena, and here she is. I'm imagining being a black woman dealing with the insecurity of like being visible in the writing world. A black woman in the writing world in science fiction in a white male dominated space. Like I'm sure she's dealing with like insecurity and dealing with like, feeling like she got to overcompensate, or feeling like she got to like perform, or feeling like she got to do whatever to be visible, which oftentimes takes away from the art and things like that. So you're dealing with like all that insecurity and things like that. Well, as a student, she was teaching a class on creative writing, and she actually wrote about this for Essence magazine, and the essay is entitled "A Few Rules for Predicting the Future," which actually is about this episode today on Black History. She says,
always on time.
Parable of the Sword, Parable of the Talent. The student was like, why is everything so devastating in all your books? And she was like, well, I didn't create the devastation. I let the dangers of the present get 30 years and become the disasters of the future. And the student's like, okay, well, what are we to do? And she says, well, there is no single answer to what we to do, but you can become an answer if you so choose. And I love that tension and juxtaposition. There ain't no single answer to what we're facing. There ain't no like, what's the magic bullet? What is our way out? What are we going to do? Well, there's no one answer. But you can become an answer if you so choose to be. There's not an answer, but there's an answer. So it's like the women's basketball. I don't know. Super Bowl, going back to Super Bowl. y'all go and look at that women's Nike that commercial. You can't win, so win. Hey! Ooh.
That'll shout.
Preach me. Preach me, Jesus.
Come on, Reverend. No, that's so good. And let me just have a moment and just say, bro, I really appreciate how you can just pull out of the back of your mind these random nuggets of things that have happened in time. An Essence interview. That's really dope.
Thank you.
It's really, really dope.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's really dope. So this episode, we are talking about Black History Month, right? So tell me, like, when were you introduced to Black History Month?
First memory, Black History Month, earliest memory is being a kid, and every time so I'm from South Carolina, obviously. Well, not obviously, y'all may not know that. I'm from South Carolina. And I'm raised in a family, I come from a family of community organizers out of rural South Carolina. My grandfather, a lifetime NAACP member, a activist in our community in a very truest sense of the word. Like, Granddaddy was active in making sure that everybody's life in poor, rural, mostly Black South Carolina got a little bit better, with every passing year. And my grandfather, he I never forget Grandma telling me a story of when the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965, and Black people, finally got the right to vote. Granddaddy would gather people around town, would drive around town in his pickup truck, put people on the back and in the bed of the truck, and would make sure that they go and get registered to vote. That just was who he was. He wanted to make sure that, like, Black people accounted for something, because Black people mean something to this country, and this world is ours. And that was shaped by his experience of being born in the 1930s in the South during the Great Depression, and being a young boy who had to walk 20 miles each day to get educated. And when it was time to leave, Granddaddy went to war, served during Korea era, and came back and created a juke joint that was his own. And so he was a man of culture. He was a man of history. He was a hardworking man. And what he taught his kids was that, like, Black history matters. So it was natural for my mother, by the time we got of age, she would always, every time we would go up north or go to Atlanta, we would always go to museums, and she would introduce us to Black history. And that was my first experience of, like, who we were. We would watch the documentaries on TV. My house was filled with books and things like that. So it was just like, I think my mom and my father knew something about, like, you may not be able to protect them from everything the world would try to make them, but you can give them a kind of armor that reminds them of everything they are, apart from the affirmation or the justification that the world gives them. So it's like, hey, you Black, and know you're Black, and that means something, and that accounts for something. So yeah, what about you? What's yours?
Earliest memory, I like movies, right? Music. But I will say I was introduced, it was something that my parents were really big on for us as kids, and particularly, I believe, definitely for me. We had an encyclopedia catalog. I'm aging myself right now, in the dress-up living room. I don't know if y'all had those.
Oh, was it the, like, World Book joint where it was like?
It was a whole volume of books.
Yeah, that's like a staple in Black houses.
Yeah, I mean, if you valued those things too, right? So we had those, but my mom was very big on, making us read, especially in the summers, and write about different historical figures. And I hated writing then. But that was one of my earliest memories. And I will say, too, with movies, Spike Lee and Crooklyn, that was one of my favorite movies growing up. Crooklyn and Troy and her family, and telling that story in New York and what it meant to be a New Yorker and to come, home to the South with her aunt, with the dog Weenie, and what the different realities were, like the complexities of Blackness. And I'll go back to the encyclopedias, and also another memory of Black history introduction for me was at church. Like, I grew up in a community church. My pastor then, like, was very big on making sure that we talked about, especially that you've talked about Black historical figures outside of Black History Month. Like, we were learning about somebody at least every month, and they were really big on that. And I think that was also the beginning of me wanting to go to school at a Black historical college, and then also my need and want for travel. Being exposed to everywhere I go, I want to know what happened to the Black people here. Like, what are they doing, and when did they get here? And there's always a beautiful story that's associated with it. But I will say the beginnings, the genesis of it is definitely my parents, and then, of course, church.
Yeah, that's real. It reminds me, what you're saying reminds me of, a documentary I try and, like, watch maybe, like, once every, like, 2 years is Eyes on the Prize. The PBS joint. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a very important. It's a documentary.
Shout out to PBS.
Hey, shout out.
Shout
for
out
real.
to PBS.
Hey, and NPR. Like all the
Yeah.
public broadcasting networks that's just so important for like education. Like
Yeah, and they're supporting of local stations. Like
Yeah.
I will say PBS also.
yeah.
PBS has and still is producing a ton of Black history just content and things that are happening and that have always happened. And it's in an unbiased way.
Yeah.
And I appreciate their journalistic expression and the way they're able to continue to keep our attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's crazy is like we're in a moment where like there's so much assault on Black history. There's so much assault on public integrity and journalism. You know, when I think about PBS, like this administration just put out a lawsuit against them for things they were teaching and things they were teaching is like Black history and things like that. It's like, you know, we're in a moment in which going back to Eyes on the Prize, I try and watch it every year because it reminds me of like, you know, Black history it's not a heroic story. Like we're not learning Black history so that like Black people can be seen only as heroes. Like we're both heroes, and we fail, we laugh, we dance, we cry, we hurt, we do all these things. And it reminds me of a poem by I want to say that was like Lucille Clifton, and there's a poem by Lucille Clifton that I love in a book called Black Aliveness, and the poem it's almost like it was written in a letter form, and you know the poem begins, you know, we want to inquire whether Black people cry, and the poem is called and it just reads response. We feel, we do da 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 da, and it constantly goes back to the we, and the we is like expansive, the we is complex, the we is triumphant, the we is skeptical, and then at the end it's like we do. And I love that because it's like all these documentaries, like we're not just like learning Black history because we just want to learn it. Like there's a part of like Black history that legitimately saves us. Absolutely. You know, when we lose our way or when we lose our faith or when we lose, you know, I'm gonna let you talk. I wanted to tell a story about this. A kind of personal story about like almost being saved by Black history, but I do believe that like in a very real way, like Black history really shapes us and saves us and keeps us. So you're good.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say like I always find it interesting when people are offended by Black history because Black history is our history. It's the history of humanity.
Yeah.
And it's not like our history is something that all people can't draw from in some form or fashion. In the same ways that I can look at, you know, Latin American history in some type of way. We're human, so there's always some type of commonality, especially when it comes to oppression and also triumph. And that's one of the things, especially right now, that I'm a little frustrated about. I'm being honest. I'm very frustrated at this idea that the celebration of history, period, is a bad thing. History is factual. And unfortunately, there are good things and bad things that come with history. It says something to me. It makes me think about why would you want to suppress that from being known? Like, what are you ashamed of? What are you afraid of? Those are the things that I kind of sit with in trying to understand why is there a need to suppress something about me and also something about yourself. Because it's a reflection. But I'm gonna let you go ahead and tell your story.
Oh no, that's real. Yes, it's both about, and that actually works perfect because it's like both about like us, but it's about everyone else and like how they think about themselves and they think about their humanity. So like, I wrote a piece for the New York Times a few years ago, and it was about my time in white evangelical churches. For those who don't know, I spent about 6 years in the white evangelical church after my time playing football at Clemson. And, you know, here I am. You know, people wonder, like, how does a Black boy from South Carolina, in rural South Carolina, as a family, come from a family of organizers and all these things from radical Black people, you know, get in white space? Football, you know, in college, you know, and many of the places, the ways we learned, how to like be faithful or whatever, was kind of in the low stakes environments of like FCA and Athletes in Action. It's just easy for us to slip in and slip out as like young people to get what we need and then go. Well, I was just one that, didn't just slip in and slip out, but I began to get socialized into those spaces. And over time I became, this black dude in white space who often, I was almost like socialized and discipled out of the place that I would come from. And I was a person who began to look at black history and black faith and black religion and black churches and black culture and black music as less than. That somehow it was subservient to whiteness and that like it only had value insofar as it like, approximated to whiteness or like, almost like you reading a book by a black person and then you testing to see whether the book is right by like something the white person said. So I became that person in faith, in religion and culture and things like that. And then here I am at a white evangelical church and I'm preaching, teaching, leading. And this is about what I wrote about the New York Times. Here I am writing, preaching, teaching, leading, all these things and dancing and like tap dancing and performing. And then Alton Sterling happened. So the murder of Alton Sterling happened. And this is in a moment in which Donald Trump, was during the first presidency. Here I am, wearing the mask, tap dancing for them, performing for like power and acceptance and validation that many young black athletes struggle with once they leave the sport. It's kind of like a God-sized gap, sometimes that whiteness begins to feel, because it makes us feel like somebody. It makes us feel like we're progressing, makes us feel like we're powerful again and things like that. So here I am in this space, Alton Sterling is murdered, and it kind of shakes me. It becomes a catalytic event. And here I am trying to figure out, like, am I the only one that feels a certain type of way about like this brother being killed, like on camera and in a very real way? I was the only one in that space that felt that way. And they sent me on a journey in which like, because of, my desire to know and to wrestle and like feel again, people just didn't know what to do with it. And then it began to turn in like anger. And like, I'm like, hey, bro, like something got to give. Here I am. I'm preaching, teaching, leading. Y'all should trust me. Y'all should, if you trust me enough to preach, then you should trust me enough when I cry. If you trust me enough to lead, then you should trust me enough when I say it hurts. And so they couldn't, right? So here I am trying to do this thing and trying to perform. And then the moment breaks. And it's like, I'm having conversations, and it's like, well, how could this person be racist? How could Donald Trump be a racist? How could, we gave y'all a black president. We did this, we did that. It's y'all here at our church. It's like things can't be so bad. And I just got fed up, and it's like I had a breaking point, and I'll never forget in my breaking point, one of my dogs handed me Martin Luther King's Where Do We Go From Here? And in Where Do We Go From Here, Martin Luther King quotes James Baldwin, Fire Next Time, which was written in 1963. And in it, Baldwin says that what people do and what they make you feel is not a testament to your inferiority, but their insecurity and their fear. It was intended that you should strive for mediocrity. It was intended that you should fail. And if we had not loved one another, none of us would have survived. But you must survive because we love you. Here I am reading James Baldwin. And I went on a journey. And I left that space. And I went on like a 2-year journey where I went to the Black Museum in D.C. I watched every documentary. I watched every book. Read every book I could. And Toni Morrison in 1972 wrote a piece for the New York Times. You want to know what a line in that said? She talked about writing the Black Book, in which she traveled all over the South to tell the story of Black history, humanity, and culture. And there's a line in there where Toni said, it was like growing up Black one more time. And for me, in the most catalytic, life-altering moment in which I became a thing that I never should have became, it was Black history that saved Dante Stewart.
That's so
And
good.
I swear by Black history.
Yeah.
Because I know what it did for me, and I know what it did for us. So.
No, that's so good, Dante. And thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable about that, because that does happen in a lot of spaces. I will say I feel like the opposite effect is happening to me right now, so I've been very angry. Because I've been educated in Black spaces, and then now I'm not in a Black space where I'm being educated. So being in a classroom where like people don't share the same experience, but also studying things like practical theology, and I'm like, how y'all missing it? Like, can we put it on the board? Let's read it. But I will say, I think the beautiful thing that we can take from this and what I'm hearing from your story and what I'm digging deep in this season of being in school in a space that I'm not traditionally used to being in education, in academia, is mentorship and the value of community. And then also in thinking about ways that we have to, as millennials, as where we are right now, like we are the new aunties and uncles, right? And our responsibility and role into making sure that the younger generations remember, right? And what will that look like? How are we going to bridge the gap in a way that allows for it not only to be taught in our households for if you're parents, but also in a way that you're teaching it to your little nieces and nephews, the kid on the block, like teaching it not only to Black and brown children, but also to white children as well. Because again, it's not just our history, it is history.
Oh, 100%.
And that's something I think is super important, because if they're going to be taking it out of the schools, if it's going to be taken out of places, there will no longer be institutions where creative expression is allowed to communicate history orally or through our bodies and dance, then it's definitely important for our institutions, our local churches, our community centers, our neighbors, us, the new aunties and uncles, to share that information, not only amongst each other, because there's a miseducation among us as peers, but also making sure we're passing that information down so that children will know the value and know more than just the name Martin Luther King Jr. and that he was assassinated, but why? So they can know the why. The why is so important. And I think we're the people that will have to fill that gap.
Oh, 100%. Because, and this reminds me of the Bible, one of the refrains of the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, is the power of the story to save us. To keep us. There's over and over again. This is the Dante Stewart version. It almost as if the Bible continually says, tell the story again. Tell the story again. Tell them again where they came from. Tell them again what happened. Tell them again what happened when they made good choices. Tell them again how they fought back. Tell them again how they created culture in the midst of this. Tell them again how they made love in Song of Songs. Like, tell them again how they overcame the wildest of circumstances. Tell them again how they figured things out and they faced resistance and they found a way to get through it, and how they worshiped and they prayed and they did all these things. And all these things made them who they were. And tell them again how all of that was God at work in their stories. Like, I never get given doing an interview. And they were asking me about like black literature, because I did my graduate work on James Baldwin, and my graduate work was about theology, like Black history as sacred text, like Black history itself is like, one is divine, and it has a power to shape and transform our lives. Because that's the story of Jesus. Like, the power of Jesus' story is to transform how we act, how we think, how we name and see and respond into the world, how we respond to one another. So here I am giving this interview, and they're like, Dante, you said that Black history is sacred text. What do you mean by that? I tell them, hey, when I see the Bible and it says, all right, here's the book of Nehemiah. Here's the book of Zechariah. We in Zechariah right now. Here's the book of Hosea. Here's the book of this. Here's the book of that. And here are ways in which their lives unfolded and their community acknowledged that there was something divine at work in their stories, so much so God was at work, even in the struggles of their story, even in their failures, even in their mistakes, even in their bad choices.
Okay, forever.
Yeah, I'm feeling kind of happy today. I feel like preaching today. Even in that, even still, there is something of value there that the community believes is so much that they will name a book after them to preserve the lives they lived. And I told them, I said, if they got the right to do that back then there surely can be, in my sanctified imagination, the right to talk about the book of James Baldwin, to talk about the book of Toni Morrison, to talk about the book of Muhammad Ali, to talk about the book of all these directors and musicians and painters and all the book of Buford Delaney, the book of whoever, book of Marvin Gaye, you know, and look at how Marvin Gaye did what's going on. And if you read the liner notes of what's going on, you see how Marvin Gaye talked about God is love, and this album is about a kind of divine love that keeps reaching after us, even in the midst of all the stuff that's going on in the 60s. So it's like, to me, it's like, yo, for us, it's like there is something beautifully divine about telling that story and preserving that story. And if, the Bible, as I believe, tells us this is the way we should go and this is help along the way, and I think for us, Black history holds that possibility and that promise as well. And I believe, like the Bible say, our children tell the generations what God has done. And I think that, recounting Black history isn't just a political task. It isn't just an educational task. Recounting Black history is very much a spiritual task. That in some sense, that if we want to know more about God and experience more of God, then we tell the story more of ourselves.
Amen.
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 That's so true.
Yeah.
So during a time like this, what is it that what do you feel like you're tasked to do in this time?
To feel.
To feel.
To feel.
Okay.
And as a writer, as a reverend, to remember. If I can feel, if I can remember, then I can write something that's honest, that's vulnerable, that takes us into history and helps guide us into this moment. So I'm applying for a fellowship right now in which I'll spend a month in Paris. And one of the things I want to do while I'm there is retrace the story of James Baldwin and Josephine Baker as expats, Black expats in Paris. And to think about the ways in which, Black Americans have always been haunted by this idea of home. Where we've been in this country, but it has oftentimes not felt like home. And I want to know how they wrestle with that question. Because I think in 2025 and even going forward, as we see people denying Black history or, many of the social good that was meant to progress Black America economically, and intellectually, politically, and spiritually, seemed to be, as Carol Anderson writes in her book White Rage, rolling back Reconstruction. We think about, America has always had periods of Reconstruction, which, we do some real good things to try and aid progress for everybody, and then it's precipitated by backlash in which people, say this far and no further. And so for me, I'm just so concerned about what are we to feel right now?
Okay.
Because everything wants us not to feel. It wants us not to be it wants us not to cry. It wants us not to be happy. All it wants us to do is just constantly respond to the stimuli of rage. And that is not, one cannot live a life if anger is the only emotion you give yourself access to. James Baldwin said that to Maya Angelou. I can't write if I'm always resenting, if I'm always angry. But then I can't move if I don't remember. I don't know where to go if I don't remember. So for me, feel, remember. What about you?
Stories.
Yeah.
I'm in search of stories, in addition to feeling, but also, like I said before, there's something beautiful about the elders that are still here. And there's something beautiful about the stories of those who've passed on that have been documented. So the biggest thing that I will continue to do is to find the stories through music. I love listening to music from the 60s and the 70s. There was a very resistant but still happy and jubilant time for Black people. And then I also love just sitting and listening to our elders just talk, because they have so much to say if people would just listen. So just in search of the stories and just listening to the music to stay balanced. And yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Yeah. That's what I'm going to continue to do. And then share it with the young ones, share it with the babies.
Yeah.
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 Yo, this week, remember, Black history is not just contained to 1 month. It's a story that we must continue to tell, feel, remember, create spaces to continue to remind ourselves about it and live into the power of it, and then walk away and be changed, because it ain't just about learning lessons. Life is so much more than just the head. Life is all about, as Maya Angelou would say, life loves the liver of life. I'm not talking about the liver that I eat with the grits. I'm not talking about fried livers with the hot sauce.
There's history there too.
Oh yeah, it is. I'm talking about, and Maya Angelou says, life loves the person who lives it.
Yeah. And
I think that, like, for us, learning Black stories, protecting Black stories, telling Black stories is about living,
Yes. And also, I just want to encourage people to remember, Black history, our history, is not heavy and just mundane.
No.
There is joy. And we've had a beautiful way of being able to resist in joy. There's so much joy in our history. And that is something I want to charge you with. Go and find stories where there is joy in our history, despite the things that are going on. And I do think that will be something that will allow for you to resist.
Yeah.
Joy.
Yeah.
Live in that.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
Go frolic.
Yeah. Give them something to listen to, and I'm going to give them something to read.
Oh.
Hurry up.
Okay,
quick.
So OJ's.
Yeah.
Love Train.
Yeah.
Anything OJ's.
Too easy.
Go for that.
All right. A Little Devil in America by Hanifa Abdul-Rakib.
Oh, that's so good.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is.
Whispers.
A Little Devil in America by Hanifa Abdul-Rakib.
Yeah.
ASMR version.
OJ's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love Train.
Yeah. That joint
Feel the
is
joy.
fire. All right. All right, y'all.
Peace, y'all.
All right. Blessings to you. We love you. We out.